Hey, folks, we are here. This is director Travis Mills.
Jared Kovacs.
What did you do, Jared?
I shot the movie.
And Tony Pelham, I'm the editor.
Okay, this is the commentary track that you're listening to on the DVD or elsewhere for Cornbread Cosa Nostra. This is a movie that we shot in October of 2017 and released this year, summer 2018. What's your thoughts, Jared, on the opening shot of our movie?
I remember this day, actually. I was a little concerned because it's overcast, and it was really, I
gotta run.
brown looking out. It was almost a dust storm is what it looked like.
Come on, Ness.
And I was concerned that we couldn't make it look like a morning or a sunset shot because it kind of it just looked ugly.
Right.
Everything was ugly.
It was totally inconsistent with what we had hoped for, which was like golden sunset type
Right.
shot. The kid that plays the young Kurt here in these few flashback scenes is Peyton Witch, who has a role in Stranger Things, so it was cool to have him involved. What was the show that we picked, Tony? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Some just public domain
we were
show.
looking through public domain, FBI or cop detective shows.
I thought it was Gangbusters.
It
might be.
wasn't
It wasn't
Gangbusters. I
Gangbusters.
can't remember what it was called.
Okay.
So then the other thing is that the young dog is from Red Kennel, I think is the name of the Boykin Spaniel breeders. So we were lucky to be able to get a dog that looks semi like Bandit, except that one's a female, and my dog Bandit, who plays the character later in the film, is male. So it's a little inaccurate.
Only 2 dogs in the whole movie.
Yeah, because the Bandit reappears at the end with a haircut. So this is in Jackson, Mississippi, which is where the FBI headquarters for Mississippi were. And we just kind of, I always thought that this law office of Dorsey Carson, who's also in the movie in a later scene, was a great look at Jackson with, I think all the buildings are pre-1982, so we were safe period-wise. We meet the FBI agent, FBI director, played by Philip Lawrence, who's an actor we've worked with a few times now. And then Kurt Cadell, played by Britton Webb. Now, Britton was not the first choice for this male lead. Originally, he was going to be played by Jeremy London, and then there was a schedule conflict, and then I cast another actor, who I won't name, who chickened out, actually, because he was afraid the Dixie Mafia would come after him. And it was only then that we approached Britton, probably, I don't know, like 2 weeks, 3. It was like really close to...
It was tight. I actually think it might have been a week and a half. We were pretty close.
It was very close, but I'm glad that he ended up playing the character. It would have been super different with Jeremy, a completely different feel. So yeah. Tony, do you want to touch base about putting this credit scene together?
Everything was tricky to get into the final cut because you had a lot of influences, 80s movie influences that you had in mind when the film was shot. So there was a full temp score that I put in place in the rough cut, and none of that music we were ever going to be able to license. So some of this stuff is cut like a music video for songs that we were never able to use. So it was tricky finding music after the fact when the film was already in picture lock. But the song playing over the opening credits here is called Jet Set Punks by Evanton, who we found on Bandcamp, I think.
Yes, and I think he's based in Greece.
Yes,
if I'm correct about that. We actually shot these driving scenes before production because there's this big event on the Mississippi Gulf Coast called Cruising the Coast, where for like 3 or 4 days, people from all around the South come with their classic cars and drive on the coastal highway. So it was really kind of a cool opportunity to get driving scenes without a bunch of modern cars, or at least the most classic cars that we could. And we just sort of pieced that together.
Held a cut around.
Yeah, there were so many shots you had. You probably annoyed with me because I was like, oh, I can see a modern car there. You got to take it out. Like even this one right here, you can see them in the background. So if you
yeah, the other problem was for the cruising on the coast stuff, which kind of led into the rest of production, is dodging the modern buildings and architecture of Mississippi, like the casinos.
Right.
Because those are the things that you see, those are the high rises of the Gulf Coast, ultimately.
Now, and what's a lot of people that are not from the Gulf Coast don't know is that none of those casinos existed in the 1980s. There was gambling on the coast, but it wasn't these huge corporate casinos. All of that stuff came after Katrina. The coast got wiped out during Katrina, and then one of the things that they did to rebuild the coast was to add all of these casinos and bring them in to try to boost business back up. We kind of got the idea for the black and white to color the flashes from To Live and Die a little bit, right?
I don't remember, because you guys did that in the edit. I remember seeing it, and I didn't pick up on it quite yet. I wasn't sure where you were going with it, but I think so. I don't quite remember.
I don't know if they're exactly flashbacks, but it was modeled after the opening to Live and Die in LA. They're not black and white in that film, but they're a stylized look, and they look different than the current stuff going on, because there's a lot of also driving and
It's been a while, but I know my way around.
establishing shot type stuff, and then it's mixed in with
Right.
a different look
They're almost
of just images, impressions that you don't fully understand yet.
they're almost flash forwards, right?
Yeah.
Little glimpses of what's to come. This scene was shot on the very first day of filming, right? Very
Yep.
first scene that we shot officially outside of the Sanger Theater,
That really
which is a
was
historic
her.
theater in
Things
Biloxi.
sure had changed.
This
Some
house
stayed the same.
that serves as Kurt's home in the
Anyway, I had
movie
to see what my new partner could tell me
was
about the
owned
Dixie Mafia,
by
or as the
a
FBI
old
like to call them.
a woman who had worked with the Dixie Mafia. I won't name her, but she worked with the Dixie Mafia for years. I believe she was a bartender and also a stripper in some of their clubs, and she had smoked in that house so long that the all of the walls were nicotine stained. You could see when we took off the paintings in the house that they'd be like white, but that the walls were like yellow. They looked painted yellow, but it was interesting, right?
Does anyone live in that house currently?
She had died like 6 months before, so we didn't get to actually meet her.
Okay, there's a shot later in the film where you can still see a no smoking sign on the door, and I wondered what that story was.
Right. This shot, real quick, was inspired by Thief, Michael Mann's Thief, with James Caan sitting by the water with his buddy, his fishing buddy.
Do you want to tell me about the title, Cornbread Cosa Nostra? Because we kind of held off on giving the title, and the title card there came after the opening.
Like where I got the title?
Were you nervous about people not knowing what the title meant, or how did you feel about the hesitation to introduce what the title was even?
I think that it felt, to me, even though it's a little unconventional, it felt better when we put that title in later, because it rides right over the voiceover, right? So at least you've got this audio from Kurt in his narration explaining what the title means, at least a little bit, and then we're reinforcing it visually. The title was actually the first thing that got me really intrigued about the project, because when I discovered the Dixie Mafia as a subject online, I went on the Wikipedia page about them, and somewhere very quickly on the Wikipedia page it said that they were nicknamed the Cornbread Cosa Nostra, and I just thought that was such a ridiculous title. It sounded like either what the Coen brothers would name the movie if they were making it. It also kind of reminded me of a Warren Zevon song title. So that's kind of what, immediately I saw something that was a crime film, but also very with a dark comedy edge to it, a little bit of a ridiculous edge. This scene, we shot on a couple yachts in
what they did to Huey
on the
Davenport,
Gulf Coast,
one of
which
their
was
own,
fun. Something
was
that we
stabbed
had not
9
done.
times
Definitely something
with a
that we'd not done
.0
before, is
gun.
shooting on some some boats, some parked
Sheriff
boats.
Cobb knew all about it.
Any comments on the naked lady and the
we
scene, Jared?
This particular shot of the boat introducing Huey and his one night stand, so to speak, is Travis and I were struggling to find how to establish this scene and ultimately what's about to happen. And the sun was setting and it was pretty intense until finally I just plopped the camera on one angle and I'm like, hey, what do you think of this? On the bottles and everything, and then we did a pan over, and
I operated
it turned out
the pan, didn't I?
Yep. Travis operated the pan, and I was pulling focus for it, so it turned out pretty good.
This girl, Angie Holland, was really concerned that we did not use a take where her breast showed because her dress kept opening up on certain takes. So I had to send her, before we released the movie, I had to send her screenshots showing that nothing had been revealed. Now this yacht, we were scheduled to shoot on a specific yacht, and we lost it like the day of, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were fighting sunlight in this shot too, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. We lost the yacht the day of, and we like scrambled, did all these Facebook posts, and we were able to get another yacht just in time to shoot that night. And then we kind of started shooting at dusk, but then of course the light was going, so it was pretty intense. This scene, even though it's very different in terms of its dialogue and its nature, was inspired by the boardwalk scene in Body Heat with William Hurt and Kathleen Turner, where they walk and sort of flirt with all of this subtext, and then they get some kind of, I think in the film it's like an icy or something like that, but they get a cherry treat, which we riffed on in this with popsicles that you're about to see from Pop Brothers, and stuck with the cherry thing. So just a little homage to Body Heat. This was cold. Remember how cold this was?
This scene was cold. This was also much like that last scene at the boat or the yacht. We were scrambling to find this because our original location, there was a storm that happened and it knocked out all the background lights, all the city lights.
Oh, right, yeah.
There was a bridge and all the city road lights on that bridge were turned off. So we decided to go against that, and we had a couple days before this scene was to be shot. And we were prospecting another location, but when we really came down to it, we were like, no, this wasn't the field. And literally probably like an hour, the Pops Brothers people said like, hey, there's the spot that we shot at.
Yeah.
And they were like, they recommended that, and we were like up in the air, and we were driving there, and that was like 10 p.m. when we got there, I think.
Yeah, it was late. Well, and then we also, the first time, I think as part of that, the first time we tried to shoot that scene, it didn't work out. So we actually had to move it to a different day because it was one at that first location. So we just had to scrap it that night and do it as a pickup on another night. This is where you meet the Ronald Trumbull character for the first time. So almost all the characters in the movie are based off of real people. Ronald Trumbull is a incredibly exaggerated version of a guy named Pete Halat, who, as you kind of see in the movie, was the law partner of, in the film, Dick Turner, but in real life, Vincent Sherry, who was murdered with his wife.
Dixie Mafia.
Halat was his law partner, and then ended up running for mayor right after their double murder, and was eventually convicted and went to jail, and now he lives in Ocean Springs again. So this character is a very different sort of exaggerated character. We randomly decided to put him in a blonde wig as kind of a Trump reference just for fun. The guy on the top is, in the film, Sheriff Cobb, but in real life, Sheriff Hobbs, who was a real life sheriff and one of the first people that the FBI arrested. Was connected to the Dixie Mafia.
Were all these real life characters involved with each other at the same time, like they are in the film?
Pretty much. I don't know if Pete Halat, Trumbull in our movie, was directly working with the sheriff on things, but they were all around the coast at the same time, and it's not quite clear who was working with who or who was in charge of what, but I'm sure that they knew each other and were familiar with each other. This was like a random pickup, this motorcycle scene with the cop. We had already shot the scene that follows this where he discovers the body, and since we had him in his gear, we were just kind of like, well, let's just drive along the coast and get some footage. And I was like joking that this is going to be for like a future 80s motorcycle cop film.
I was nervous cutting it. There wasn't an awful lot of coverage, but it worked out for what we needed it for.
It's a nice little, it feels like a very 80s appropriate random transition to cut to him, and you're like, where is this going? So that worked. We almost got kicked out of this parking lot. I don't know if you remember that. But the person
when we were further down, I think on the strip, I think is the issue we ran into.
Well, he didn't want us to be there, period, because he owned the parking lot. So the guy that owned this parking lot of this sort of abandoned strip mall did not want us to be there, and we were just kind of able to get our shots real quick and then move on.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed that little scene there.
And the cop, the guy that had played the cop, was a real cop in the 80s and 90s in Biloxi. He's the friend of our police consultant on the movie, Joe Peavy, who had worked the real double murder and was a lot of big help. This is a little place in Van Cleve, Mississippi, just north of Ocean Springs, that I liked a lot and wanted to incorporate in the movie. It just kind of had like a very 80s vibe to it. The burger barn. And then the cars in the featured cars like this, I think were mostly like the blue one is from our picture car coordinator and stunt guy, Larry Letcher. These were just some B-roll shots that we got one morning, right? Before the crew showed up.
Yeah.
Song playing here is called Vulture. How'd you come about finding that?
That's a good one. The woman who plays Beth, Summer Baldwin, her husband Chris Carter is a lawyer and musician, and he had offered up a couple songs probably, I think, before we even started filming the movie. He said, hey, you might be able to use this, and then you were able to work it in really well in these.
Well, he introduced another song that we didn't end up using with Cornbread in the title. I think that's what gave him the idea.
It was
where country is cornbread or something like that.
That's right.
But then this one, the Vulture song, I liked much more for where we were going.
Yeah, it was cool. It has a different feel than the other 80s stuff in it, but I think it works with this scene. That actor playing Tolbert is actually a famous football player named Marcus Dupree, who they've done a 30-30 on. He's originally from Mississippi. We connected to him through Jeremy London, and it was interesting working with him. Kind of a side character that just kind of pops up here and there, but it was fun, and anyone who's a football fan enjoys recognizing him. You want to talk about how we set this up, Jared?
Well, it was hot.
It was really hot.
It was kind of ultimately came down to a really simple setup. We just had a 1K light just on the outside there, and then the ambient sun spilling in. It was tough. That was a tough scene to shoot because we wanted it to feel cold, and we were trying to get it quick, and actors are sweating, and
we tried forever to get the smoke to work because originally we really wanted to like all of this smoke from the idea that the freezer truck, you open it up, but it just didn't work. We tried so many different things with dry ice, and it just wouldn't show up, wouldn't last long enough in the frame. I think this scene we had to use several wild lines, right?
Yeah, the sound that was recorded on set was really rough. There was so much background noise.
This was a really noisy area that we liked, and we knew almost while shooting it that the sound would need a lot of work in post-production. Wild lines, if you're not familiar, are extra lines that we would record on set, kind of like ADR, dubbed lines, but we go ahead and get them during production after the scene's done. so that the actors are there, they're still in the moment, they still remember their timing. And they've actually been pretty helpful in saving our butts a few times when there's audio issues. But yeah, this was, all of these scenes were, I remember October, it was still really hot in Mississippi. We were baking. Not quite comparable to Arizona summer, but pretty hot. This guy, Dan Michael, that plays Little Harry, that character is based off of a real life hitman named Little Henry, who was one of the most vicious killers in the Dixie Mafia. I'm currently reading another book about the Dixie Mafia called Dream Room, and he's just, the book opens with him getting pissed that someone knocks his hat off a table and hatcheting a guy to death in a parking lot. That was the first time he ever went to jail. So, although he looked very different than our portrayal, he's pretty equally sadistic in real life.
When I read the screenplay, this was the scene that stood out most to me, was the whole alligator farm, and there wasn't a slaughterhouse in the screenplay, but I was very interested to see what the footage looked like when it got here.
Right. I can't remember what we wrote in the script. The slaughterhouse thing was something we discovered with this location. This is another tough location because we'd had one say yes in Moss Point, Mississippi, and then they bailed on us, I think like a week or 2 weeks before we were going to do it. And we found this place in Hammond, Louisiana. I think you say the name of the place, Clybear. Here's a little shameless product placement there for a Biloxi Gulfport brewery, Chandelier, sorry. But anyway, back to this. I don't remember how the scene opened in the script, but we found their slaughter room with all these alligator pieces and just thought that would be such a unique thing that I haven't seen.
I've seen nothing like it
Previously in a film. It's pretty odd. And it kind of makes up for the fact that there aren't a ton of gators in the scene. Now, when you see this alligator in just a bit here, that pond that it's in supposedly has like 200 alligators in it. They're just all hidden in all of that, nastiness. So
unfortunately, we didn't see them
the way
because it was so hot out.
It's so hot
they were
out.
all underwater, cooling off, and that one was the most social with us, so we decided to play with him.
Social.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy that was there that owns the place, like, gets all the way up to these things and like sticks his hand in their mouths, and like we have footage of him sticking his hand in their mouth and then pulling it out right before they try to chop down on it. It's a pretty intense experience. Have not been around an alligator before. But yeah, this is a fun shoot. These two women one came from Florida, Ashley Bates, the younger one, and Cindy is quite a character. She spent like hours before shooting doing her hair, talking to herself in the mirror as in character, which was pretty humorous for everybody on set. This is our hero car came from a guy named Larry Letcher who lives on the Gulf Coast, and I don't really know much about cars, but I guess it's a really unique vehicle because it's a Nova, but it's like an Oldsmobile hybrid Nova. Anyway, I don't know much about it, but everybody who's seen it, who knows cars, is like, whoa, what is that? So, why don't you talk about how we shot in this office and how we tried to keep it interesting, if you can.
Well, we see this office many times in the movie. I think this was the first scene that we did in production. And one thing that I mentally had, I don't think I explicitly mentioned it with you, but I saw this contrast of this really hot, warm, in the thick of it, color temperature in contrast to over here in Georgia. Is that where it was?
Yeah, it's supposed to be Atlanta.
Georgia, or Atlanta.
That they're talking with the other agent.
It's very air conditioned, and I liked playing that stark contrast with the colors. But yeah, that was the first one, and that really kind of set the tone with how we would eventually light everything else in this.
Was that the first scene that we shot in
That
the
was
office?
the first scene we did, yeah.
See, we shot this movie mostly chronological, and that was both difficult and helpful because we could kind of tweak things and change things as we went. So normally movies are shot completely out of order, and that was not the case. Now is this a Crystal Vision song that we've got in here?
Yeah, how did you find Crystal Vision? I'd never heard of them.
Crystal Vision, the heavy metal song you hear in this scene, is I think the 80s or 90s band, I don't quite know the era, of a guy named Ken Rock, who's based in Arizona, who's now acted in a couple of our movies. So when we sort of put out the call for 80s era music, he hit me up and provided a couple songs that were really good.
We used a second one later on too.
Yep. So this scene is pretty crazy. We shot this on a rural airfield, privately owned, and we did it all in one day. Not just the scene, but the chase scene that follows and the plane landing and all that. So it was a lot of high stakes filming that we had to get right.
On top of that, there was absolutely no service for any service provider out there. So whether no matter what phone carrier you had, you had to make sure you knew where you were going beforehand, because
this is my hand, real quick. I'm going to interrupt you real quick. My hand is the mosquito hand.
10 days after,
almost
at the end of production.
Chronologically.
Oh yeah, exactly. And also, if you're really paying attention, I think I'm whiter. I'm more pale than he is, but
I remember that was
get away
pretty
with
close
it.
to being completely done with shooting, and we were pretty concerned that no mosquitoes would be coming out.
Yup. So we had 3 cameras on the landing, and we got 2 takes on the landing. Like that's how many times he was up to take the plane
well,
up.
we originally only had one landing, and
right.
The first landing is the one that makes it in the movie, I believe, because we just got lucky. But fortunately, he was down to go a second time for us, and that was
right.
That was a good safety take for us.
And we had our main camera behind the talent with the shot that you see with the plane landing and them all standing, and then we had a GoPro in the plane.
Mm-hmm.
No, we had a
plane
GoPro
wing.
on the plane wing, and then we also had your other camera on the ground.
Right, where the shot you see the plane fly over just before landing is the B camera.
Now this scene, we also had 3 cameras. Most of the time, the GoPro was hooked to the side of the car at times.
Yeah, you only see one GoPro shot in the chase scene, but in the Nova, for the most part, is the B camera, and Travis is operating that. And then I'm with the A camera in Sheriff Cobb's vehicle. We did
right
one
here,
take here
yeah.
with the car mount, and then for the rest of it, I was in the passenger in the rear hand holding, as well as Travis in the Nova doing hand hold. And that was a pretty gnarly dance between 2 cars and 3 actors and 2 camera operators. It was pretty incredible.
We used the camera mount in 2 ways, right? We had it both on the hood once, or for a couple takes, and then we also had it as a side mount where you see the 2 shot through the window on the FBI agents. I remember on a couple of those turns we'd be like hanging on for dear life, like when I was like hanging out the window with Roy with B cam. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. We pretty much shot this scene until there was no light. We shot the shit out of this scene. It was pretty ambitious that we did this exclusively in one day. On top of, just before doing this in the same day, we also did the setup where the drug deal goes down with the plane landing.
Yeah.
So this schedule, though on paper seems just insane, we pulled it off, and with ease it almost seems.
Right. Now the music is really cool. It's Attitude, right? From Cotton Yancey's band, Mississippi. So we'll see Cotton later in the movie. He's been in a few of our movies, but it was kind of a little bit of an unconventional choice to use it as our chase music. But I think
it was
worked
nothing
really well.
like what we had in the temp cut. where I don't remember
I think
what
we were
song
using
used,
something from To Live and Die in LA
Yeah, it was
or
something-
Miami Vice or something like that.
something much more fast paced.
Now, talk real quick about cutting that scene and some of the challenges of it, or how you approached it.
One of the biggest challenges was that the cars absolutely weren't moving as fast as it's cut to look like they were moving. How fast would you say those cars were driving?
Probably 30, 40 miles an hour most of the time.
I couldn't answer that. I remember Sheriff Cobb was
He
saying
went 70 at some point.
I remember-
'Cause he was,
yeah.
and we had to tell him to slow down because obviously, you know, we're doing this in a sort of guerrilla way.
Yeah, I remember I was in it, and I was operating while he was going 60, 70, and I'm not. I'm in the back seat and the passenger.
Yeah, that scene was
it
by
was a
far
trip.
the longest it took to cut. There was so much footage, way more. I mean, you talked about all the cameras used, but there was so much footage to go through, and a lot of it was shaky. A lot of it can be blurry with the handhelds and
Just the right
and
official in the penal system.
people interfering in the shots. But
Now,
We
real
know
quick,
how
let
they
me
were
interrupt.
making
We
it, how
shot
they
the
were
jail scenes in the Hancock County Jail, which is north of Bay St. Louis. And a lot of people have asked, what's the deal with the black and white uniforms versus the red and white? And what we learned there was that they'll put the prisoners that are highly dangerous in the red and white.
The
So
ones
we-
who will potentially act violently will
Right.
be in the red stripes.
So we decided to put Jeremy London, who plays Percy Hicks, in that outfit. Now his character is based on the character Kirksey Nix, who was one of the main Dixie Mafia guys. Kirksey Nix may have been one of the shooters of Buford Pusser, for anyone familiar with the Walking Tall story, who shot his wife and shot him in the jaw. And he was supposed to be one of those assassins. So he was actually in Angola, but we couldn't get permission to shoot in Angola. He may still be alive. I think he's one of the only Dixie Mafia people that actually isn't dead. He's still rotting away in prison. And just real quick, one last note on the chase. That actually did happen. I don't know if it happened like that, but the FBI agents busted Hobbs at a set-up drug deal, and they had a car chase with him before they finally tracked him down. And I think he was even throwing evidence out of the car. I don't think I made that up. I got all this information from a combination of just some basic online research, and then speaking to one of the FBI agents on the case who didn't want to be credited or named in the film, but he is the basis for the Kurt Cadell character.
can you say how you tracked him down?
When I first found the Wikipedia page, I started going on YouTube, and there's a few like 30-minute documentaries about the Dixie Mafia. I saw him interviewed in those and thought, maybe, I wonder if this guy's still alive. And it turns out that he's still alive. He lives on the coast. He really was from there. So the whole idea of an FBI agent wanting to go back to their hometown was straight from him. It was true. And that's kind of what gave me the narrative through line for the film, was the idea of going back to your hometown and trying to take care of the bad people there. What did we take inspiration from this? I feel like there was something that we...
I think Jan Hammer's score, Jan Hammer?
Yeah, from
His
Miami
score,
Vice.
Every time I watch this scene, I picture something from the soundtrack of Cocaine Cowboys. I think that is my mental inspiration for how we put this together. I don't quite remember on set though.
Well, that's what you used, Tony.
Yeah, that's
in
what
the
was
first
used in the
cut.
temp cut. What ended up in the film, here's from someone that goes by the name Heartbeat Hero, which I believe we also found on Bandcamp. We were very fortunate with the short time we had in finding artists that agreed to let us use their music for in most cases nothing. This Heartbeat Hero happened to. I was trying to find electronic stuff that would kind of sound like Jan Hammer, but this was an electronic sounding piece, and he actually had an album that the album release almost coincided with when we needed the film to come out, so it was kind of fortunate that it came out when it did. It was very new when we found it.
Well, did you know that there was a storm coming?
Directing Bandit, my dog, was interesting. Basically, we would do the take with the actors, and then we would just set up the camera on Bandit, and I would stand behind the camera and ask him if he wanted a ball or a stick and try to get all these like head turns to cut into the dialogue. Was that difficult to work with, Tony? Cutting the right moments?
It was not difficult. They were almost always good takes with him, and I think the audiences agree.
Yeah,
He steals the show.
Pretty popular. They get angry with me that he dies later. But, yeah.
Spoiler.
Exactly. Spoiler alert. Hopefully you're not watching the commentary before you've actually seen the movie. So this is talk a little bit about, it's not actually raining here, Jared. So talk about what we did with creating the rain in our ghetto independent film movie.
It's really quite simple, actually.
There's that no smoking sign.
We only oh yeah, that's right. We only set up one light for this. In the background, the window light with the water in that previous shot was just ambient skylight coming in. But this key light on our talent here is also another 1K light that we set up inside, and we went this really blue route, more colorful, displaying the emotion of the scene in the rain and. I don't know. That's about it.
Right.
We used hoses for the water.
Yeah, we have a couple people outside with hoses just spraying down, and if you look really closely, there's actually the water is coming into the house because the house had these
on this
leaks
window,
in the window. So if you look really closely
Kurt
at some of the
Cadell.
shots, you can totally tell that it's not dripping on the outside; it's dripping on the inside. But it had a nice texture to it. I felt like it was kind of very 80s to have this, rain and then the sort of love making, but we don't show it, and then they wake up and it's rainy. It's very neo-noir. We also took some inspiration from some of the Manhunter blue. Michael Mann's Manhunter, he's got William Peterson and his wife in bed, it's just like bathed in this crazy blue. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's what some people think is the best scene in the film, which is interesting to me, our crawfish dream. We got the crawfish from a place, Desports, that sells seafood. They donated the crawfish to us. This is a crazy scene to do. It's the only slow motion in the movie, right?
Yes.
I think.
Well, there's some at the pool.
Oh, that's right. There is some
yeah.
in the pool.
Well, this food was really good. The crawfish, and they had sausage and potatoes. That's what I remember most.
We ate the crawfish and drank beer after we were done this day.
This was the only thing you shot this day, right?
Yes. It was kind of like supposed to be a fun day where we would shoot this and then just hang out for a little while.
Yeah, this day was like a Friday in school. It's the last day of the week, and
Right.
You're excited. Your teacher planned some cool...
It was a Friday, too.
It was a Friday, and they had this cool curriculum, and everyone was like a party. So this scene was quite enjoyable to take on.
A lot of the actors didn't want to eat the crawfish and didn't know how, so I finally had to kind of yell at them at a certain point and be like, hey, would the character eat the fucking crawfish? Because if so, you need to be eating it like you love it. Just do it.
I remember Mary Lafarge, the lady...
Marcia Vega,
who played Mary Lafarge here, she was allergic or couldn't eat
she can't eat shellfish or something, so she just had to spit it out.
Yeah.
But she did some of the best takes. Now this is just, the blood is pretty ridiculous. It's just our makeup artist, production designer Julie Tosh had just like a blood cannon, and we would just point it at the talent and just spray them with blood, which...
I definitely did not understand what you guys were going for when I first went through this footage. And you remember in an early take, I cut right before she got blasted with the blood, and you're like, why'd you do that? And I'm like, I don't understand what's going on there.
Right. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Did you end up feeling like you understood after the whole movie was done, or do you still not?
Well, I guess I just didn't understand how it was even done, and the blood at the pool later on. similar. It's just a strange way to go about it. It looks great, but
Right.
it's just a strange idea. It doesn't look what you would think it would look like.
It's very random, for sure.
There's a take right here where Beth wakes up and says, "I left him." And there was only one take that I fell in love with the take, but the sound was not very good on it. And I fought and fought to try to keep that in there, and we did end up using it. I really like Beth's take here.
Because of just the way that she
The
says
way,
it.
yeah, just the way she said it. It was the only time she said it the way she said it. I really like the way the two play off each other here.
Yeah, this is a nice little scene that sort of introduces or furthers the theme that was important to me, that this nostalgic idea that things used to be better on the coast or in America, and they're trying to return things to that. But like Beth says, maybe it really never was that great, and I think that's the conclusion that he comes to at the end, that it's just like a constant struggle to make it good. There's always new bad guys and new conflicts. It was difficult to get the rain shadow. I remember we struggled with it for a while, and I was very impatient with you. I was like, "Figure it out, Jared."
Yeah, because we had like a limited amount of water, I believe, and the problem was because that was inspired by In Cold Blood, and they did a rain shot, and I wanted to do something similar to that, but unfortunately, a rain shadow. To do that, you need to have your light be super far from the water to cast that sharp shadow. So we pushed it as far back as we could, and we got like that soft wash of water, which I think still worked.
Now, this whole thing that they talk about here, the Lonely Heart scam, was a real scam that the Dixie Mafia pulled across the U.S., and it even went internationally, where basically they would blackmail closeted homosexuals into giving them money, and supposedly it was all to get Percy Hicks out of jail by getting enough money to bribe his way out of Angola prison. The photographer in the scene is actually played by the owner of the club you see as the nightclub, the strip club in the movie, which is a real swingers club in Gulfport, Mississippi, called Close Encounters. So Pee-wee, the owner of the club, played that character, and I think he did a really good job. And he is a photographer. He takes pictures of models, so it was just kind of perfect. These scenes were like the hardest to get for some reason. I won't get into too many details, but Jeremy was like really out of it and sort of not understanding, and just like take after take. I think you struggled to go through the takes, right, Tony?
Yeah, well, we were trying to get shots without him talking, and he kept ad-libbing lines, and
right.
we're like, no, that's not what we're looking for here.
You could hear me on the soundtrack
Yeah.
going, "No, don't say anything," and he would always like ad-lib some lines, and I didn't see it that way. So
I like the way this whole sequence ended up, because it's one of the least linear parts of the film, because there's about 4 scenes that are kind of cut up and mixing and matching inside this, and that's not necessarily how it's written, but I think it plays well and kind of condenses the action.
I think you did a good job putting it together, because when we shot it, remember, we were kind of unsure how it would piece together.
Right. Yeah. It plays like it's much like a montage, but very subtly. There's no, it's not a traditional montage, because it tells the backstory over the dialogue.
Right, with these little flashes.
Yeah.
Now, one interesting thing that I was going to talk about it while the images were up, but I'll mention it real quick, is you remember we lost light in that scene too. In the wide shot of both agents, there's light coming through the window, and then we were so concerned that when we cut to Kurt's close-up, that there's not nearly as much light coming through the window, but it just shows you how little the audience picks up on things like that.
Right. It kind of can play as a little bit of subjective shot as well, but unfortunately, logistically speaking, we just didn't have enough of our own electricity to match with the daylight.
Now, this beach is sort of a secluded private beach on the Gulf Coast that my uncle showed me before he passed away, and he was kind of the one that got me really interested in the Gulf Coast. And we used to come here with his dogs, his Boykin Spaniels, and I really wanted to incorporate it in the film. It's not as pretty as the other Biloxi beaches and Ocean Springs beaches, because it's actually not man-made. The other ones are all, they shipped in the sand, they trucked in the sand, but this is what a real Gulf Coast beach looks like. It's a little dirty and ragged, but I think it has a great look for our film.
One thing that most people that aren't from the Gulf might notice and might find a little odd is there's a lack of waves, which I find absolutely fascinating. Some days when there's absolutely no breeze, it looks like just diamonds of blue.
And the reason for that is that there's all these barrier islands, at least the reason that I understand, that are catching a lot of that, right? And so it's the sea between the islands and the actual beach is much calmer. Now, we had Jake Speed's soundtrack under this, which was really hard to let go of and find something that would fit, because Jake Speed is one of my guilty pleasure 80s favorites, and it worked so well in these emotional scenes. But I think that we found I think it was off of Free Music Archive that we got that.
Yeah, I think that it was 3 Chain Links was the name of the artist, and that's the only theme that we repeat in the film. It's used 3 times, I think, always at the beach.
Yes.
Same beach.
First scene, this scene, and then the very last scene. Now, this Bandit's Death thing, obviously it's very difficult to work with animals, period. And we couldn't show his face because I think it would have been almost impossible to make him look dead. But I just laid off camera and just kind of hid my hand and petted him until he calmed down and was just whispering off camera, go to sleep. Go to sleep. And we finally got it to the point where Kurt could come down, walk up to him, come down, sit down, touch him without him moving.
Yeah, you explained it in a very casual manner, but when we were shooting it, it was pretty intimate of a scene between both Travis and Bandit, but also the scene itself when we would call action. It was
the leads play it great.
Yep, they do handle it really well. Coming Up is, for me, one of the best songs that we got in the whole movie.
That's kind of what broke the floodgates open on finding music. We were looking at the Free Music Archive. We were looking all over the place for pre-existing music that we could possibly use for free, and we're coming to a lot of dead ends. And you found this guy. This is Fragile Tom out of Germany, and I don't even know how you found him, but it kind of opened my eyes to the idea of just approaching artists myself rather than finding things already listed as free.
Right. I found him on Free Music Archive, believe it or not. And then that led us, and then you found more of his music.
Oh, that's right. He had twice the music, including what we had at Free Music Archive listed on his Bandcamp.
And he was.
I don't think this song was on the Free Music Archive. I think that's why we approached him.
Right.
Is because I thought this song would work better, and it was listed on his Bandcamp. And then you approached him, and he was very personable, right?
Yes. Oh, he was the first one to say yes and show us it was possible. So, Jared, I want you to talk about the black light in a second, but real quick, the music that we used in this scene was So Far. Am I screwing up the name of this? So Far Away? Is that the name of the Flock of Seagulls song?
I Ran.
I Ran, right. I Ran So Far Away by Flock of Seagulls was what we were playing on repeat when we shot this scene.
Fuck, that was an intense scene when we were playing it, honestly.
It was so great. It just felt so 80s to have this black light.
Incredible.
And then I'm feeding Britton, I'm taking him off to the side between takes and telling him that his real son is dead, to try to get the emotion out of him.
Is that I don't want to call anyone out. Is that what's he looking at on his phone when he's trying to really bring up emotion?
I think it's pictures of his son.
Okay.
Because I had told him that and kind of surprised him, and then we kept on trying to get there, and there were some takes that were more emotional than others.
The black light came to me when I read that scene in the script. I felt the opening scene from Belly, for those of you who have or have not seen it, and it's quite ridiculous, but the approach was very intriguing, and fortunately Travis was willing to let that route be taken.
To me, that sequence is probably my favorite sequence in the whole movie. So I love the way that we shot it, that it cut together, the lack of music, the lack of dialogue, and
Yeah.
just the tension of this sort of standoff in the club.
What was really interesting in that scene was Mary Lafarge's makeup was orange. When we put that shot in, we didn't know what Julie also did makeup on top of production design, and we didn't know quite how the makeup would react. So once she came in,
She looked gnarly,
it
but
looked
I loved
pretty
it.
intense.
Yeah. It was really cool. This upcoming grave that you'll see for Bandit was actually just a pile of stuff in the backyard of the house that we were shooting at. It was just like I don't know what it was, like just a pile of dirt. Or
Yeah.
I was like, Jared, I think this is a grave. This looks like a grave to me. Like it looks like a grave.
Now, is this
mound.
shot early in the morning? Because I have a recollection that there's an outtake here of a very helpful bus driver yelling at you guys.
Oh yes.
Oh
Is that
my
this
goodness.
We need to dig up some of those outtakes. Yeah, the bus driver was yelling.
We
at
were
Hey,
us.
lights are on.
We were
And
rolling on that?
It was super early in the morning. It was like we woke up at 5 or even before then, I think, to get
It was
ready for
early,
it.
and then I guess the bus came over. The bus driver pulled over before taking the kids to school and said someone's lights are on in the front yard. Britton was infamous for leaving his car headlights on and door open every day, and it was
I didn't know
that was the one time where he was
That's
put
so
on blast,
funny.
I guess.
Oh man, that's so funny. I didn't know that he did that.
Good people in the South didn't take his car.
So the one thing that was added to this character from what the real FBI agent told me is, you know, he did come back to the coast, but I remember one of the first questions I asked him was, so were you already married then? Because I knew he had eventually had kids. And he said, oh yeah, I was already married. I remember thinking, that's boring, right? And we got to create this. We got to give him a dog, and we got to give him a love interest, and we got to make it way more 80s movie-fied. So this house, so originally we were looking for a house that was in the same neighborhood where the Sherrys, who in the movie are the Turners, were actually murdered. Their house has been demolished since then. We couldn't find any house in that neighborhood in Biloxi, and we looked at a couple options. And I liked this one because it just had this crazy architecture, this crazy layout that kind of fit to me, and again, kind of like it was part of a Michael Mann movie.
Yeah, it was very different from what we were originally projecting, but I agree. It turned out for the better, I think. Especially this decoration in the background. What comes to mind is Willem Dafoe's house in To Live and Die.
Yeah, for sure. To Live and Die, I think, is the biggest influence on this movie. We watched it. You watched it on your own. I watched it, and then we watched it all together, and with Britton, and really kind of helped him with ideas about body language and behavior for his character based off of the William Peterson role. Now, this was an interesting night with Trumbull because, you know, he didn't know when I cast him in the movie that I was going to put him in this ridiculous blonde wig. I sprang that on him, like, I don't know, a week or two before production. And I think it made him really, like, kind of insecure as an actor because I basically made him a farce on screen. And I remember the first couple of scenes, you could tell he was struggling with it, but this night,
He figured it
just
out.
owned it. And you
Yep.
can tell in his performance that it got so good. And remember, we were I think we cracked up. We ruined a couple takes on this one because
His eyebrow flick was just, that's the point where you tell, like, he's owning the wig.
What I love about that wig is that when I was watching the footage as I was editing it, I wasn't sure it was supposed to be intended as a wig for a long time until you get Britton's line later about he's as crooked as the rug on his head. I'm like, okay, so everybody in the film knows.
right. And then of course the ultimate payoff when they pull it at the end, which everybody's been waiting
Which
for.
was discovered as an additional scene in
Oh, yeah.
production. That
That's
was
right.
not in the original script. We're talking way in advance here, but
The buttercream callback.
Yes, exactly. Now this was a hard scene, I think, to cut, but it was also hard to shoot because it was completely improvised. So we just had these two actors as the hitman, and then Kevin and Marsha, and we just kind of fed them lines, and some of it worked, some of it didn't. So it was kind of hard to find the right stuff that worked and to figure out how to piece it together, right, Tony?
Yeah, Marsha really got into it, and they were just yelling insults back and forth. But then it was hard to match because they didn't relate to each other at all when I'm trying to cut between the two different hitmen there.
It's weird when I think that we're, almost an hour into the movie, and we're just now meeting the Johnny Handsome character, played by Creek Wilson, because he's such a big part of the movie, but we don't meet him until this point. He was based off of a real-life hitman named John Ransom, who was hired to kill the Sherrys, but then backed out for, at least what I was reading, similar reasons as what this character does. We named him Johnny Handsome in reference to the Walter Hill film with Mickey Rourke, Johnny Handsome, from the late 80s, which is one of my favorite crime movies.
Do we want to talk about the Handsome short film?
Yeah, so after I had an idea, I think I came up with the idea in pre-production, right? Before we started shooting.
Yeah, you conceived this idea before, when you actually introduced the opportunity to shoot this for you introduced the idea of additionally getting little short films for certain characters, Johnny Handsome being one of them.
Spin-off short films. There were originally 3 of them planned. One about Johnny Handsome, one about Tex Armstrong, who you haven't seen in the movie yet, and then one about Percy Hicks. And the only one that's been completed is the Johnny Handsome one, which was directed by a Mississippi filmmaker and actor named Miles Doliak. And basically the scenes in that short film were originally part of the Cornbread full script. I don't know if you remember that, Tony, but when you went through the script, there's all these little flashes to things that people Johnny killed and stuff like that that we never shot.
I don't know if that was even in my version of this script. I do remember there was, at the very beginning, there was supposed to be a whole montage introducing what the Dixie Mafia was, and we ended up just cutting. Well, you didn't even shoot anything like that, and you're like, well, there's going to be like a short film maybe shot later that we're going to incorporate here, and I'm like, how about we just go to young Kurt to Kurt in the FBI office, and that's how we ended up doing it for brevity. But yeah, there were ideas for a lot more being shot that just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, we'll get back to that in just one second. Real quick, I want to say that this character, Phil Jones, is played by Kevin Goss, who's actually an Arizona actor. Didn't know him when I was making movies in Arizona, but he found me for this project, and he flew out for it. And his wardrobe is a direct reference to Willem Dafoe's character in To Live and Die in L.A. They're driving a Pinto from some people who lent us some vintage cars for the film.
I'm going to interrupt here.
Wait a second. I'm going to interrupt the interruption, just so you know. The hand that taps the newspaper here in a second is not Creek Wilson, Johnny Handsome hand. It's actually Jared Kovacs' hand.
That's also one of the few errors in the film. The newspaper that was printed says Atlanta, and Creek says Alabama in the previous shot. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Like I didn't even know that was a direct reference when I was editing this together. I thought those were two different things. And you're like, do you have a take where he says Atlanta? And I'm like, oh, that's what that means.
Yeah, we screwed that up big time. This is another. You still got your thought?
I'll hold it for later.
So this is a couple of things here. KK Stars, who's the lead in our new movie Silver Slipper, also came out from Arizona for this film, and I never worked with her before. It was a good experience. These people just flew in for a day and kind of did their role, and this was not in the first draft of the script.
This was also added probably right before production, I would say, at the earliest.
And I think for me, this is one of the better scenes in the movie, and it's an interesting touch because there wasn't really anything in the original script that showed the dual side of these people, that there's this kind of tender human side to these killers, and I think it works well. The woman playing the stripper here, Angelique, is based in Mobile, and honestly, our strip club scenes would have suffered so much if we didn't have her, because not only does she really know how to dance, but she provided outfits and she helped with all the other girls, and she was just great. So
was it her snake?
It is her snake, yes. So when she introduced that idea that she could dance with a snake, I was like, yes, please bring it. So go ahead, Jared. You held the thought.
Starting out.
Uh-oh.
So, for those watching the commentary, there's probably more of these references to come in the rest of it. I propose a drinking game for you guys. For every time you see a To Live and Die in LA reference, you take a drink.
Maybe.
That's it.
So we actually, the first couple of movies we did commentary tracks for at Running Wild, James and I, our sound mixer, on previous films, we did drinking game commentaries where we set our own rules, and as we were doing the commentary, we would take a shot for this, drink a beer for this. We're recording this right now in a library, so that wouldn't work very well. But we got smashed. Like the end of one of the commentary tracks, we had no idea what we were saying. Like we listened to it later, we both blacked out. We ended up like punching each other at walls that night. Like our girlfriends hated us. So anyway, maybe not the best idea for a commentary track, but I like Jared's suggestion of watching the movie and playing along.
Is this a largely improvised scene or just one written very late?
I think this was written also as an addition, because I remember it being called like scene E or F on the slate.
Yeah.
So it was something that was added in, and I don't remember why we added it in, but definitely wrote it a couple weeks before. This is a fair that was running in Pascagoula during the filming. We had a real hard time finding something, and very lucky that the people that ran the fair were up for us shooting at it. Originally it was going to be on a like Ferris wheel, right? That he's a Ferris wheel operator.
Mm-hmm.
And then we found the sort of gun game which seemed appropriate. The boy that shoots the gun is Julie Tosh's youngest son. So that was pretty cool. Now this house is where they test fire the gun is the real house in Biloxi where the gun was test fired, where the hitman stayed before killing the Sherrys, who were the Turners in our movie. We approached the owner of the house, who I won't name, and he was very kind. He wanted to know our intentions with the movie. We were honest with him, and he was very kind to let us film in there. And it was kind of eerie to film in this place where the hitman had really stayed, and probably a lot of other crazy things had happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought for sure that was made up because it just seems so convenient about the test shots being fired. That really happened?
It really happened. He fired test shots into the floor, and then that was the corroborating evidence that came later, which you see in the movie. Of course, what did not happen was, the finale.
Sure.
But still, those little touches were all real, and it's kind of those little stupid criminal things that always get these guys, right? This shot.
How about this shot?
Go ahead, Jared. Was not planned until we got there.
Yeah, I mean, because we discovered the location so late in our scouting. I don't know. It's just interesting with the geometric shapes.
Hand cameo. That's my hand, by the way, with the gun in front of the headlight. I gotta call out on my cameos. Okay?
Yeah.
But yeah, the house it kind of had that really interesting open feel with all the windows. I'm glad we were able to capture that in that shot and other shots. It's owned by a guy in Biloxi named Paul Manger, who's produced, I think, one film and has just a history of arts in his family for going way, way back. So he was very helpful to the production. Very nice guy. It's actually across the street from the Hitman house, and Kurt's house. So Kurt's house in the movie and the Turner house and the Hitman house are literally across the street from each other. They're right there, which made shooting convenient, coming back to that area over and over again.
Jesus Christ.
So this was a tough one for Travis and I to figure out, was how should Dick Turner be laying dead? Travis was modeling himself in all these intricate positions.
I'm usually the stand-in before the actors come in. That guy that plays Dick Turner is actually sort of a local celebrity on the coast. He's on the news. He's got these shows on local TV. So it was kind of fun to incorporate him. Now this shot was supposed to be kind of a riff off a similar shot in Blood Country of following the lawmen up to the house.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
Is this the most takes you guys did?
On this shot?
Yeah, it seems like of all the shots, this one had the most takes that I remember looking through.
How many takes did we do on this? This one was a pain in the ass
We
to
did.
master.
Well, there's just so many elements. It probably seems
Yeah.
simple to the audience watching it, but not catching certain things in the background and
Yeah.
keeping the actors in focus and not
Well, even
having
just starting with the car pulling in at the right spot.
Oh yeah, were there a lot of takes where we missed that?
Well, it was tough because we had just off screen at the beginning. We had a bunch of like people parked there. We also had this main street right behind us that we didn't block off, and there were constantly people driving by and potentially sound issues and all
I
that
think we
stuff.
kept modern cars out of it somehow.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well.
Now I fought you guys on this shot.
You totally did.
Tell me about. I like the way it ended up in the film because I like the POV, but I also think it gives another look at the very modern house,
Right.
which I think adds an interesting flavor to the film.
You wanted to cut it up.
Yeah, I had it moving in the same order, but just sliced up and shorter. So it was kind of like impressions of the dead body. There's Travis again.
Yeah, this is another director cameo. Not my hand. This time I get my full body in frame. But yeah, you had it sliced up, and it was one of those things that we just were stubborn about because we had intended it to be this long shot creeping through the house, which again has a very Manhunter, Michael Mann vibe to it. I think they do shots like that in it, and then we flip around, and it was Kurt's POV, but then we see him, and we have this flash reflecting on his face. Remember, your camera's flash broke half, like right before we started doing the first takes. So
Yeah.
I took my cell phone, hid it behind your camera, and flashed, which is kind of fun.
It was. So we actually used a film camera with a flash, but my camera, it was a Leica Mini Lux, and it got a weird error, so the flash wouldn't trigger, so Travis cheated his phone flash. So we tried, for those of you who pick up on that inconsistency, but it worked.
But yeah, I'm happy with the feeling of that for sure. I think the other reason that it feels like a Michael Mann Manhunter thing is the temp music was from Manhunter, wasn't it, Tony?
Yeah.
It was that like flute sounding
Right.
track.
That
from
was something
Manhunter.
very hard to find to replace too.
Yeah, where did we find that? Was it Free Music Arc? Oh no, it was in Compotech, wasn't it? Wasn't it Kevin?
McLeod or
Yeah, exactly. Who has a lot of great free music for attribution. Now, the montage coming up is, for me, one of the things I'm most proud of in the film. How we shot it, getting all those scenes.
a lot of information coming at you quick.
Right. So Tony and Jared talk about that scene and just the challenges of communicating the information through the shots and everything.
The challenge for me was that there was an awful lot of information to get across in basically a music video.
Mm-hmm.
We had the length of a song, and again, I cut it to a song that we weren't even using, so then I had to go back and try to match, and I did cheat a little and recut a little bit, but there's so much information here with they finding a car, and there's a funeral, and Beth learning to shoot a gun, and trailing Benny Hicks, a lot, and it's just so much footage wasn't used, and it was just giving them the key information over. Oh, another big challenge was that Beth actually gets pregnant and has a child all in this montage, and shoots a gun before and after being pregnant. So there's a whole lot of there's just an awful lot of information here. And I didn't even mention the snake and the dancing that goes on.
It was kind of originally inspired by these montages in a movie called The Connection, which is a French movie that touches on some of the same stories
Organized
from
crime.
the French Connection. It's kind of the French side of the French Connection, and they have these crazy montages that just show so many things, some of them important to the story and some kind of random. That's where it stemmed from, and it took us I feel like it just took us days to pick up these little scenes, whether it's the funeral, the shooting, the dancing, right?
Yeah, it was in between the bigger scenes, because this is a montage. We would get to a part of the production, and we'd be like, oh, this would be a great moment to catch here or catch there.
Real quick, this shot with the billboards, those are not the actual billboards. There's a little ode to our horror movie Bride of Violence that's coming out later this year. Jared did the digital work on that, adding it later in post. Was that tough?
It was tough. I still don't think it blends well, but you viewers, you tell me.
It got laughs when I saw it.
It looks great.
Did it get laughs?
It got laughs, yeah.
That's
because
really
of? Do you think it got laughs because?
It got laughs
just,
because of the Trump reference.
Right. Okay. Cool. Do you think that played in? I wasn't watching in Arizona, so did it a couple times? Did that play?
When
he's on
not
TV?
Both the billboard and they're on the TV. Those got laughs.
It's interesting. I should have peeked in for those because in Mississippi, the Trump thing does not go over very well. It just is very like tense. Like you can tell everybody's just like that's not funny. But in Arizona, it might work a little better. I'm curious to see if when we release it on Amazon, if people comment on that at all. This whole idea of having the snake around the talent was kind of an interesting abstract concept.
Neither Lafarge or Petrovich looks very comfortable with the snake.
No,
Can you tell me about that?
I think Petrovich was straight up uncomfortable. Marcia said that she was fine, but you're right, she does look pretty stiff. So these newspapers are really hard to recreate. We couldn't get the right paper. I'm still not happy with how they look, but I think they pass enough. But as you can tell, like it's not like a real newspaper. This is a great shot. I loved how that turned out. This area was one of the first. Both that area
is
and
favorite.
And this one, it was a good job. Tony's idea to have them match with walking across the frame.
Yeah.
I don't think we intended that when shooting.
No.
We had no idea.
Yeah, good job, Tony.
Thanks.
This area underneath the bridge and that other area were some of the first locations, just exteriors that I knew I wanted to work. I wanted to set something at. I've just always liked this spot. It feels like something out of Miami Vice or Manhunter, To Live and Die in LA, this combination of the sea, but then very urban at the same time. So
The train's a happy accident, right?
the train, we were actually, so the scene previously that you had asked if it was improvised with Evelyn Turner and him was shot just like 100 yards from here, right? And we wanted a train to cross in that scene, but the schedule was wrong. And there was actually originally dialogue about a train as a metaphor. So anyway, this was a happy accident, and we weren't sure if it would work, but you made it work.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of a weird image to see a train going across the water. This dissolve was interesting because we hadn't. I don't think is that the only dissolve in the film?
No, there's all of the dissolves for me were afterthoughts, except for the one at the Turner house showing the passage of time with the setting of the table. But with the other dissolve is earlier in the film with Percy in jail, and they were neither one of them were what I originally intended, but I really liked the effect of both of them.
Yeah, they work. So Tony, you've done this a couple times now with us. We have a script, we shoot it. We often don't stick to the script. We change things. You get all the footage. You don't really have notes to work with. What's that like? Because you have the script. I made a version of the script with some notes, but is it difficult approaching these scenes and trying to figure out what changed on set?
I usually approach it the same way you guys shot it. So you say you shot this mostly in order. I tried to edit it mostly in order as well. So it's usually streamlined enough that I understand what's going on in the script. But there were times when I would ask you like really stupid questions, and then later I'd be like, "Oh, obviously this is resolved 2 scenes later." If I just looked at the footage, ahead of time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think in this film there were 7. Did you go through G? There's 7 additional scenes that were added that weren't in the original screenplay that do fill in important information, and the film couldn't be told without them.
Well, yeah, and it's good that we had them in. Lots of those things got added just because we could tell that there were holes in the script and we needed to fill them in as we went, which is again is another good thing about shooting chronologically because you can kind of do that. Rex Armistead, here played by Cotton Yancey, who's in a few of our movies, is based off. Sorry, the real life guy's name is Rex Armistead. The on screen is Tex Armstrong. Now Rex was a Mississippi lawman. He worked with the Highway Patrol for years. Ended up becoming very political. Then became a private detective. He went after the Clintons, trying to get all this blackmail information on the Clintons. Very like highly conservative, controversial figure in law enforcement in Mississippi. And we took him, again, kind of like the Trumbull character, in a ridiculous direction. I remember when Cotton first read the script, he just saw him as a very kind of trench coat wearing G-man. And I was like, no. I want this crazy cowboy who wears wild shirts. And we got this red shirt that you'll see him wearing later. And he like fought me. He didn't want to put it on. But
was the idea of his character being on the wrong side of segregation, was that originally in the script, or was that added? Did the voiceover come later? Because I remember when I put some of the scenes together, I didn't understand the joke until later. That clicked with me that he was kind of a racist character,
and that he's got this tension with the black agent. Roy.
Well, not only that, but then in the church too.
In the church, yeah, that's true. He was on the wrong side of segregation. There was this shooting at a university. I'm blanking the name of it, in Mississippi, and he was there, and he was one of the people that claimed that. Basically,
that's one of the short films.
It was supposed to be one of the short films
incorporated into this,
which was partially shot by our assistant director, and they still haven't finished it. So hopefully they will be able to finish the short film spin-off Tex that fills this character out more. But yeah, that was part of the script, and our intention all along was to have an African American play Roy and to have some tension there between them. I remember we got the fried chicken from a local place called Hearts, which is like one of the ultimate guilty pleasures on the coast because it's a fried chicken buffet where you can even get chicken gizzards. Did you eat chicken gizzards for the first time? They were good. Yeah.
For whatever reason, there's a lot of backlash against that, but they were tasty.
The donuts, ripping off of the thing, the food theme, the donuts coming up that Tex brings are tater nuts, which is a place on the coast that made from potato flour, and we wanted to do a little product placement for them, so that's why we had them in the film, which is kind of fun.
Supposedly they're good. I had never tried them though. I never got a chance.
You had a comment on this scene when you cut it together or when it was finished, Tony. I can't remember if you said it was the hardest or if you said it was one of the best scenes in the film.
I was very impressed by the way you guys shot this. I think I said it was one of the most complex scenes you ever shot, and it doesn't look that way. I don't know if that's a credit to how I edited it together, but there's so much movement and information that needs told here. And I don't know how many different setups you guys had for shooting this scene, and then you added the massage parlor shots inserting into the scene, but still trying to keep the momentum going, because the whole thing is ramping up the entire time. There's this tension that keeps building throughout the whole scene, with the comedy from Tex there too. I just thought it must have been hell to try to direct this and have it come together the way it did.
It was tough. I remember it being tough, but everybody was pretty much on point, other than Cotton, who kept on fucking up his continuity by leaning forward or not leaning forward. And I was like,
how many donuts did Tex have to eat?
Oh my God, he ate so many donuts. And the continuity of the donut is totally changing. There'll be like a tiny piece in his hand, and there'll be a big piece. But we get away with it. But I remember just yelling at him because I'm like, you have to stand at this part. You have to lean forward at this part. Some of the inspiration behind this ensemble scene was actually, for me, when writing, was LA Confidential, because there's a lot of scenes like that with Russell Crowe, Kevin Spacey, Guy Pearce, and they're all interacting, and there's this movement in it. And
They're never talking over each other. It's just very sharp. And the way that we were able to edit it and keep it sharp, I thought was a testament to how it was shot.
this scene was ridiculous to shoot with Creek naked, and Jared and I getting underneath the massage table for that. We just kept on cracking up.
Jared fucked up a few takes there that I really wanted to use.
We
He
need
was
to-
laughing and shaking the camera.
Oh my god, we need to pull some outtakes from that. And of course, Creek's just like totally uninhibited, just gets totally naked in front of all of us, and announcing first, "I'm a grower, not a shower," and then just disrobing completely. And we're just like, get our 18-year-old intern out of the room immediately. It was really good. But, yeah, I can't remember where I was going with that, but it was pretty crazy. Now, the church scenes, I guess we'll wait to talk about the church scene. That gun whip took forever, too. Remember that? The little, like, I don't know what you even call that.
I don't even think I used that in the first cut. You're like, no, go back and find that.
Yeah.
We worked too hard to get that right.
I was insistent. Kevin McGrath, we haven't really talked about him. Now, Gina, real quick, is an actual bartender on the coast, and we threw her in this role, which was a lot of fun. And but Kevin is based on the coast in Biloxi. He's been there for years, and he's just one of the strongest actors in Mississippi, I think. He's also in Blood Country, and I thought he brought a real interesting humanity to the role of Petrovich.
Definitely shows in this moment here.
Where he's just fallen apart.
Yeah.
I'll let her down.
Yeah. So this really happened as well, just to go back to the real story. A prisoner so Rex Armistead was hired by the daughter of the Sherrys, Turners in our film, to crack the case that the FBI was struggling for years to crack, mainly because it wasn't in a federal case. They couldn't work on it officially. Rex was able to get this prisoner named Caspian to give evidence against all of these Dixie Mafia guys. I believe they did try to kill him in prison. Sometimes I forget what's real and what we invented. But that was sort of inspired as well by To Live and Die in LA, where John Turturro's character is almost assassinated. The assassin is played by Alan Belcher, who was a UFC fighter and is now based on the coast. So that was a fun little cameo for that. Tony, talk about the cross-cutting of these scenes, the challenges or the fun of cutting this together, and the original music we used.
This scene here at the pool, the temp music I used, I was trying to always, when I was choosing the temp music, I always wanted it to be era appropriate too. That's something always important to me. So I had her listening to Milli Vanilli here, Blame It on the Rain, which was one of my favorite songs when I was like 8 years old. So very cool. And then she changes the radio and it starts playing It's Raining Men. So we got this rain theme. Roy gets shot, falls into the pool during It's Raining Men, and it all came together with the prison scene cut in between, and there was a lot of problem there too with trying to get the right motion there, because it's happening fast, but not a lot of the takes have the motion happening fast. So that was a challenge to cut this scene right here. But then to go back to the pool where that's happening, it was hard to find the right music to replace like a joke that I created that we couldn't use, obviously. And this was the single hardest piece of music to replace, for me at least. I mean, that was probably the last piece chosen. I tried how many different pieces, like 3 different times. I would send you and we always had on the back burner like, yeah, we can use this if we need to, and I just was never happy with it. I was searching genre tags on Bandcamp and SoundCloud and everything for high energy, anything that might sound like It's Raining Men. And I ended up finding this Russian singer that goes by the name Margot. And it's not entirely era appropriate. It sounds a little more 90s to me, but it worked enough. And she was so enthusiastic when I approached her to have her song in a film in an American independent film that she started just going crazy on social media. And she before she even replied to me, I saw her write on Facebook like, "Can this dream be true? Someone in America wants to use my song." And people were wondering like, "Hey, be careful, this might be a scam."
That's great.
But yeah, she's been very supportive of the entire process and very enthusiastic that we used her song here.
This leg here is actually a fake leg because originally it was a gag that we actually had. We wanted the leg to get stabbed and have blood squirt out, but we're not very good at special effects and don't have a lot of experience with it. So unfortunately it did not work.
That shot's still great though.
The shot of his head slinging down. Yeah, that looked really good. Julie did a great job with his wound. Every time we shot the blood cannon, there would be blood all over, as you can tell, the concrete and the side of the pool, and we would immediately cut, and then 4 or 5 of us would grab rags and have to clean it up. It was just insane. That was a really difficult scene.
You did it in relatively few takes, though, didn't you?
I think we got really lucky with that entire scene.
We did it in a few takes because we were very economical, I think, about saying like, okay, we can only do like 2 takes,
Right.
and then we got to get another shot and then another shot.
Primarily, the biggest reason was we did that scene exclusively with the sunlight. There was no extra artificial light that we threw in there, so the performances, the shots that we lined up, I think, came together really well, and we got lucky with it.
This scene was inspired. It looks very different, but it was inspired by the scene in Miami Vice's pilot episode, where "In the Air Tonight" plays with Don Johnson calling his ex-wife and sort of saying that they're going to go off and they're going to do this crazy thing. So that's where that came from. Again, it looks completely different in our version of things.
Who's the baby?
The baby is our production designer's nephew, and we used 2 different babies, I believe, because they're twins. I think one of them is in the...
Yeah.
I can't remember if we just ended up using the one, but I think we used both because one would get tired and the other one not. This shot, we barely had enough light outside the church with them pulling out. Oh my God. So the church scene, originally this was written as a full congregation. Okay, that was our intention. Only 5 or 6 extras showed up. So at the last second, we decided to make it this ridiculous, almost Leslie Nielsen, Naked Gun level absurdity with text, really searching a congregation of 6 people, right? And I remember, Tony, your response to this was kind of like, I remember you sending me a message sometime in the editing, maybe with responding to this, where you're just like, were you intending for this movie to be straight up silly at times?
It took me a long time before I understood exactly what you guys were going for here, because it's goofy, but it doesn't really, watching the footage before it was cut, it didn't necessarily play as comedy to me. And I think we found the tone we were looking for.
Right.
But just watching the footage, first of all, I'm like, what's going on here? Like, I don't...
It was pretty random and thrown together at the last second. I love that guy's reaction though when Tex turns on him with the gun because it's just so absurd. Do you remember if this got reaction?
It didn't get a ton of reaction, but when he quickly turns to that one guy in the congregation, that got laughs.
Now, one thing that happened here was in one of these shots, not this one,
I love that woman with her hands over her mouth.
She just stays that way. I think I told her to bring them down, but she couldn't remember to do it, so she just stayed there like that. But Johnny had this toothpick. He always has a toothpick in these scenes, and during one, remember he swallowed his toothpick. He got caught in his throat. Not the whole thing, just a piece of it. But he's and he played through the take. And then I said cut, and then he got up and he's choking. He's like, hit me, right? I can't remember if it was Cotton or someone that's pounding on his back.
Yeah.
Almost lost our actor, death by toothpick.
Yeah. In the moment, how ridiculous it was, I didn't know how
if he was
insane.
serious.
I didn't know if he actually swallowed it, so it's really crazy to think back to that.
Well, he's
actually
always
happening.
trying to screw with me because
Right.
he's like trying to. His goal in life is to piss me off on set, and for some reason he can't. I'm always yelling. Like Cotton has to do nothing for me to yell at him on set, but Creek is like mooning me all the time on set, off camera, or like in the one scene he kissed the stripper's butt, like to try to make me mad. By
Yeah, I
ruining
hope
the
no one got
take.
sued for that.
Oh yeah, exactly. We might. I don't know. We should.
I don't know if anyone should see that scene.
Well, there's
Might
a
be a bad
beautiful
idea.
look from Johnny Handsome right into the lens
After he
doing
does
it,
it.
and he knows there's guilt all over him.
It's so great. Yeah, he's quite a character to work with. He's been in every one of our, I think, Mississippi movies so far, which is fun. Starting off with a tow truck driver in Porches, and his roles have just gotten progressively bigger. I'm hoping to cast him as a lead soon, and his acting just keeps getting better and better. So
So this is it for Cotton, right? Do we know like total screen time he has? So
I
he's
don't-
hardly in the film, but he steals the whole film in a way.
that's good. He will love it if he listens. He probably will never listen to this, but if he does, his ego just like blew up. But yeah, he's not in much of the film, but he's one of those really kind of iconic characters, and it's crazy that he doesn't show up till what, like an hour and a half into it. So I think he's only in 10-15 minutes of the film. This shot just kept crack. Jared and I ruined so many takes. I don't know if you remember that, Tony, but for some reason the combination of Roy wearing the cast and him shooting at the TV, just in his expression, just kept cracking Jared and I up to the point where like I had to go hide, not look at the frame during the takes. It
Yeah,
was-
Roy, his character just has this subtle comedic value to it.
And as a person, like as an actor,
Oh, yeah.
he brought a lot of comedy to the set, a lot of comedic ideas, which was fun. So, yep. So this is what really, to catch back up with the true story, you know, they basically did a first round of arrest based on that Caspian confession. Fabian, was the real life prisoner's name. And they arrested Petrovich, who in real life was Mike Gillich, and a bunch of other people. But those guys basically did not talk and reveal the whole plan. They didn't know who actually pulled the trigger on the Sherrys until years later, which is kind of what you see in a very fictionalized version here coming up, where Petrovich does talk, and then that leads to the climax of the film and the second arrest of Ronald Trumbull, who in real life was Pete Halat.
What's in it for us?
That last scene on the beach was hell to cut because the kid's acting was like that one take was so perfect, and I wanted to use it, but then certain lines of dialogue were kind of missed that needed to be like at very certain parts and abbreviated. Like even the first cut, I think you're like, this needs to be shorter.
Right.
And I'm like, but I need to keep that first shot too. So that one was really hard to go back and forth on to get that same kid's reaction, because you're not going to be able to direct the kid. How old was he? Like 5, maybe?
Yeah,
Not even?
3 or 4.
Yeah.
And he was also, so he is the older brother of those babies. So
Okay.
the bunch of Tosh is in this movie as the kids. And he was so difficult just to get him to sit or stand in one place. He was just like running all over the place. And I'm just like, just stand here and look this way. And I'm really terrible at directing anyone that's like 16 and under. I have like no patience and no idea how to talk to them. Remember when they brought the baby actors, I was just like, hi baby, okay, just don't cry. Like, I have no idea what to do. So this scene was, I remember on one of our last days, and it was, even though it's a simple scene, it was one of the most frustrating.
Yeah, it was the day before the last day. It was day 24 of a 25-day shoot, and it was the first scene of the day, and who knows what it was, but it just felt like something was off, and it was scary because who knew if we were even getting what we needed. It was overcast, and we wanted it to be this high-stakes moment right before the reveal of the location, and we did what we could to make it work.
Where was this shot?
It's also shot where we shot the other office scenes in like these trailer offices that are in North Biloxi. It was in Biloxi, right? Yeah, not Gulfport. And we just rented them for like 3 weeks and shot in them kind of off and on. So Darby Matthews, who's also an executive producer on the film, plays the lawyer character. And she's pretty good for only having one scene. It would have been nice to do more with her, but it was just can't stretch the movie out that long. Now what he does here is semi-unrealistic, leaving in the middle of the interview, but for the sake of the story, for the movie, we had to do this. We also have to have him bring his family to the investigation, which again is a stretch, but I think surprisingly it works, right? And I started to learn with some of this stuff that the audience just doesn't.
It happens
think about
quick
it.
enough that no one's going to really question
Right.
it, I think.
Maybe that's the answer to storytelling. If you do it quick enough, they won't question things. But this was different scripted. I can't remember all of the differences, but we discussed it and discussed like the logic of it and him leaving the gun and all these different things to try to make it better and better. And the second to last day of the shoot, this was, I think, right? And we were running out of light for this whole sequence we basically had an afternoon to pull this off, but it was very complex getting him under the house. Our crew had tried all these things with the bullets coming through. They weren't really working, right? There were just so many ideas and theories that we discussed from the beginning of production. It's the day of. We can't really, when the bullets come through, we can't really see them.
What is that effect?
So
you guys just blast
there
the
actually
air?
is a hole where the FBI cut out, and it's been replaced by a temporary floor, right? And they were trying all kinds of different things. They tried like an air gun or whatever, like an air compressor. Nothing showed up, and like shooting leaves and sawdust through. What ended up working the best was baby powder. Them on top with baby powder in that stuff and baby powder down below is what finally showed up on camera. Jared and I are squeezed down there underneath this house, which was pretty intense. But this last part, as you can tell, things is a little cloudier and darker, and it gets a little further, more so as it goes. It's just so hard to get these moments, this action, with Beth, and the hitman falling down is the last thing we shot. You can see that that's darker, even though Jared did a good job coloring it. It's darker than anything else. We just did like 2 takes of that. I remember we were moving too slow, and I just told Julie to give me the blood. I'm like, just give me the blood. And I went up to the actor and just like splashed it on him, and I'm just like, fall down the stairs, fall down right here, right? And it worked. And this scene, we didn't know how it was going to play or cut together, but at several screenings, there's been this applause when they find out that Beth is the one that shot him, which I think is just a really cool, unexpected reaction.
What I didn't expect, because I'd heard you say that previously, the screening I saw it at, there was actually a gasp when it cut to the kid holding onto her leg, and that's
really?
not something I anticipated, but it was like, there was this gasp of like, oh, the kid's there too, like.
Right. It seems to work, and it's a stretch of the imagination, but that whole thing seems to work. And in a subtle way, I think that people enjoy that the thing comes around with Beth after her training with the gun, and that she's the one that takes out the bad guy, not the FBI agent. This scene was added later again as an idea of pulling the wig off and having that payoff, and he's actually, to get him in that reflection, remember, we had to boost him up on 2 apple boxes.
Yeah, I'm playing on the reflections. We had to cheat him higher up than he really was.
It's funny how there's all these little things like that you have to do in filmmaking that the audience would never imagine that that's the case, but just little tricks to be able to get someone or something in the frame, in the reflection, right? Blocking the camera from the reflection, all that kind of stuff is pretty nuts. This is one of my favorite scenes in terms of just the dialogue and the acting, because it kind of just slows down here.
Was this shot chronologically too? Have they gone through everything as actors at this point? Because I think they play this off very well.
Mm-hmm.
This is the final. I think
This
we
is
shot
the first
this on
scene of the final day, I believe.
of the very last day. So we actually shot these final scenes that you see in the movie back to back on the last day, starting with this one, then the restaurant, then the beach. And yeah, so they have all that to reference, and I think it shows, like Tony is saying, they've got this dynamic between them, which works really well.
It is. I think it's a pretty intimate moment between our two characters here.
What comes after, we're gonna run out of time talking about it, so I'm gonna go ahead and touch base on it. The beach was just insane because, again, we'd left the last scene of the movie as the last thing being shot without time for any pickups or reshoots or anything like that. And yet again, we pretty much ran out of light trying to get it. And ended up being
film.
Yeah. Or media.
Some of the sound lasts on the last take lasts longer than it's like the film died right at the right time. You got it, and you're like, I hear the audio, and you're like, oh, I guess that's it.
Did you? You could hear that on the
yeah.
audio. That's so great. Well, I don't know if I ever told you this, Tony, but we were sitting there and we were covered with sand fleas because for some reason the beach that day had all these sand fleas on it. We're getting eaten alive by the sand fleas. Every take, I've got to chase after Bandit with the stick because he just runs away with it. I've got to tackle him. So I'm covered in sand and mud and sand fleas. We're miserable. We keep shooting him pulling the gun, which you all will see in a little bit. We did so many takes of that, tried it different ways, shirt tucked, shirt untucked, all of this stuff. And all of a sudden we're just and we shot it twice, once with the sun up and once with the sun down. And we're looking at it, and Jared has told me that we're going to run out of media eventually, running out of light. I'm just having him do take after take, and finally it just says, like, no media left. And I looked at Jared and said, it says no media left. And he just kind of subtly looked at me and says, I guess we're done. So that was the end. This really happened to the FBI agent and was something that I really wanted to incorporate years after putting Pete Hallett behind bars. He ran into him in a restaurant when the guy, not too long ago, because the guys moved back to the area. And I said, what happened? And he said they just kind of waved at each other from across the restaurant. I thought that was a fascinating moment to incorporate into the movie.
Now, it was very important to you that we had this shot that I somehow missed the first go-around of Creek riding in on the motorcycle. And I was thinking there's a shot of the motorcycle also in front of the church. And I thought that it was really important that he be associated with this motorcycle. Is that really the only motorcycle in the film? Or was there an earlier time where Creek and the motorcycle are...
There's a motorcycle, when they do the test firing of the gun at the Hitman house, there's a motorcycle parked outside.
Oh, that's right.
And we were originally going to
He was going to pull up, right?
He was going to pull up. There's a take even, I think, of him pulling up, but we didn't use it. And we were going to get, extra footage of him riding to the carnival. But the guy that owned that motorcycle was a big pain in the butt. He was a Harley, and we ended up losing that, and we found the replacement Honda, I think, which isn't as much of a Hitman bike, but it worked for the time period, worked for the setting. So yeah, I think that we need that shot at the end because the end is vague enough already that it helps connect it back to the fact that it's Creek coming to fight with him. So anyway, thank you for listening to the commentary. Do you guys have any last thoughts of things you want to discuss about that end scene or putting this together?
I like that the ending is short and sweet.
It's very 80s in the sense of the freeze frame and also cutting off some of my favorite.
Oh, this is Fragile Tom again, we should point out.
Oh yeah, exactly. It took us a while to figure out what we wanted the end credit song to be. What was it in the tent? Do you remember? Oh, it was Jake Speed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, anyway, very 80s ending. So thank you for listening to this. Jared, anything else? Anyone else thoughts?
No.
Typical cinematographer. All right. I hope you enjoyed the movie. Thank you.